Hi Antonio, thanks very much for taking the time to come and see us. Could we start off learning a little bit about yourself and your business?
My name is Antonio Perano. I'm the CTO of Science Logic. Science Logic is an award-winning software provider of technology for IT environments, specifically IT operations environments, to be able to manage and monitor all of your IT infrastructure, whether they reside inside the four corners of your building or out in the cloud somewhere as well.
How is the cloud going to fare in 2013 as opposed to how it fared in 2012?
So in 2013, there continues to be a massive investment taking place by big businesses as well, still in virtualization. Now, a lot of those big businesses have called their internal IT environments private cloud as a modern nomenclature. But in actuality, I think more and more of them are very quickly realizing there is a massive opportunity to outsourcing that IT infrastructure to an external cloud environment too. And that really is where the bigger benefits are going to start taking hold. As bigger and bigger business start to recognize that it's not just palatable to do so, it is an absolute necessity to take into consideration what your options are from a security perspective, from a financial perspective, from a key performance perspective as well. And those are all the options that external cloud providers can offer to you.
The value of the cloud has obviously been demonstrated time and time again. What is the main reason why businesses are still failing to make that initial investment in cloud infrastructure?
I'd say traditionally people have really talked about security in the cloud because it does sound like a very nebulous thing. But today I would say it's not a stumbling block so much as just a discussion point. I think the bigger hesitation is to actually know what they're getting into from a performance perspective, and that's where service level agreements are becoming increasingly important. The visibility and control over your IT assets that exist either inside your IT environment or out in the cloud is critically important. And to get that consistency, to understand that you're dealing with apples and apples, is very core to the modern day cloud tools. And that is something, for example, that Science Logic does today, but there are many other vendors who are starting to modernize their technologies as well, understanding that the cloud is something different and enterprises don't just expect to throw it out there, but to actually have good visibility into what's going on out in that cloud environment today.
Now, we've seen a big movement internally from businesses away from a siloed model towards a whole business decision-making process. How can IT professionals demonstrate the value of cloud to non-technical staff?
Yeah, I'd say in the past 5 years, cloud computing has become very popular with the sort of geeky IT guys, the rogue IT departments for test and development purposes, rather than have to go internally and ask for money again for another piece of software, another piece of hardware. It's far more convenient to ask for it externally. But that tactical decision-making move to the cloud is being replaced by a far more strategic decision. And if you're going to make a strategic decision, what we're finding is that it ultimately influences your entire corporation. So it's best to get the executive buy-in from all executives in a large organization, because your marketing department of today is not the same marketing department of 10 years ago. You no longer are simply producing slicks. You're actually having very granular decision-making processes driven by what's going on online, right? And you can only do some of that processing using some of the new cloud applications that are available today. Your marketing department, your financial department, your sales department, with some of the tools that they are using today, are all using newer tool sets that are made available online through the cloud. So at the end of the day, every department stands to benefit from it. And if you leave somebody out, it's going to draw the rest of the organization backwards as well.
Big data was one of the big buzzwords in 2012. Do you think that it was oversold by solution providers looking to pitch their product? Or do you think we're going to see increased growth heading into 2013?
Big data is one of the core applications of the cloud. And I think that even though it's a very nebulous concept in itself, it really stands for many different things, because producing the big data is not a problem. I think every single day, all of us, by virtue of the fact that we're using the internet and using the cloud and using IT, are producing massive volumes of data. I think what's happened is a very slow recognition of the value of that within that data itself. So rather than just the application we're using, suddenly for retail stores, for example, to be able to understand both the consumer that they're dealing with, the nature of the consumer, how their consumer moves around the internet, for example, or how their consumer actually leverages any of their products. At the same token, understanding operationally the productivity side, how they've produced some of the retail goods themselves. Big data is becoming invaluable to ensuring, for example, the consistency of all of that produce. I'll give you a crude example. Taking a photograph of every single produce being produced over and over again, you can start to actually make measurements about the repetitive considerations around the measurements of that produce. and get it really right over and over and over again. So you're standing by the quality of your product at the end of the day. So people are using it on all fronts in a very practical sense today. So even though it's a nebulous term, I think what's important is people are using it for different parts of their business. It's very valid in today's world of moving forward and being more intelligent about your decision-making process. And you can only make those intelligent decisions with the consumption of valuable data. So it's not just the availability of the data, it's the way in which you manipulate that data. It's becoming more and more important.
Now, the issue of data privacy has of course been a hot topic in the media, in no small way fueled by the actions of legislative bodies, both nationally and internationally. Do you think we're going to see a resolution of some of these big data privacy issues in 2013?
So yes, there are absolutely a lot of concerns around the need for privacy, continued privacy in the internet today. But I think there's also a need for education. And I think a lot of the consuming public, as well as businesses, need to understand that most data is actually normalized and anonymized. So most of the time, the way in which big data is being utilized today is not necessarily specified at an individual per se and understanding who they are necessarily, but rather the trends. And when you start correlating trends together, you start coming up with very interesting things. And I think that can be useful for both the consumer at the end of the day, to have far more useful ads, for example, to have far more useful internet searches, for example, but also for the cloud providers themselves, as an example. They're looking for the public to have more consistency and trust and understanding of what they're doing too. I think at the end of the day, having certain legislative models that people can understand at least what they're dealing with when they go to the cloud, I think is far more important than having something that's absolute and restrictive at the end of the day. So I think having an ability for consumers to compare and understand what they're getting into, and then allowing them to make their own decisions about how much privacy they're willing to forego or not forego, as long as they're better educated, I think is more important at the end of the day.
Thanks very much for your time, Antonio.